It was a crisp autumn morning in the small town of Willow Creek. The leaves, a medley of reds, oranges, and yellows, fluttered gently in the breeze, carpeting the streets in a vibrant patchwork. The annual Fall Festival was in full swing, and the townsfolk were out in droves, enjoying the various attractions. Children laughed as they carved pumpkins, couples strolled hand in hand, and the scent of cinnamon and apple cider filled the air. At the center of the town square, a towering scarecrow loomed over the festivities, its wide-brimmed hat casting a long shadow. Beneath it, a pumpkin carving contest was underway, and the townspeople marveled at the intricate designs being created by the local artists. Detective Isabella Viller was enjoying the festival with her young daughter, Diala. They had just finished their third round of caramel apples and were heading towards the hayrides when Isabella's phone buzzed. A quick glance at the screen turned her cheerful expression into a frown. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Diala asked, sensing the change. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Isabella replied, crouching down to her daughter's level. "I have to go to work, but I promise we'll come back later, okay?" Diala pouted but nodded, understanding that her mom's job was important. Isabella gave her a quick hug and handed her off to a friend before hurrying to her car. As she drove towards the outskirts of town, her mind raced with the brief details she'd received. A body had been found in an abandoned barn, and the scene was unlike anything seen before. The barn was a relic from a bygone era, its wooden beams sagging under years of neglect. It was a place the locals avoided, shrouded in rumors of hauntings and strange occurrences. As Isabella pulled up, she noticed the flashing lights of several patrol cars and the familiar figure of her partner, Detective George Harris, waiting by the entrance. "Hey, Isabella," George greeted her, his face grim. "This one's different." "What do you mean?" she asked as they walked towards the barn. "You'll see," he replied, pushing open the heavy doors. The interior of the barn was dimly lit, with only a few beams of sunlight piercing through the cracks in the walls. As Isabella's eyes adjusted to the darkness, she saw the outline of a figure lying in the middle of the floor. The victim was a middle-aged man, his face frozen in an expression of sheer terror. But it wasn't the look on his face that made Isabella's blood run cold.
It was the gaping wound in his chest. A large, jagged slash ran from his collarbone to his abdomen, as if someone had hacked at him with a serrated blade. Next to the body, half buried in hay, was the murder weapon, a pumpkin carving knife, its orange handle smeared with blood.
"What the hell?" Isabella whispered, kneeling down for a closer look. The knife was the kind typically used in pumpkin carving kits. Cheap, flimsy, and definitely not something you'd expect to see in a crime scene. "There's more," George said, his voice low. He pointed towards the back of the barn, where a series of deep gouges had been carved into the wooden wall. Isabella followed the direction of his finger and felt a chill run down her spine. The gouges formed a pattern, an intricate, swirling design that mirrored the type of carvings people made on pumpkins. "Who found the body?" she asked, trying to make sense of the scene. "A couple of teenagers," George replied. "They were exploring the barn when they stumbled across it. They're pretty shaken up." Isabella stood up, her mind whirring. The knife, the carvings, it was all so bizarre. She had a gut feeling this wasn't a random act of violence. There was something deliberate about it, something calculated. "Let's get a full team out here," she ordered. "I want every inch of this place searched, and we need to find out who this guy is." George nodded and began making the necessary calls as Isabella continued to survey the scene. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something, some vital piece of the puzzle. The victim was quickly identified as Thomas Reed, a local farmer known for his reclusive nature. He lived alone on the outskirts of town, rarely interacting with the other residents. A search of his property revealed little, no signs of a struggle, no indications of why someone would want him dead. As Isabella and George delved deeper into Thomas's life, they discovered a peculiar hobby of his: pumpkin carving. He was an enthusiast, known for creating some of the most elaborate and detailed designs in the county. Every year, he entered the town's carving contest, often winning first place. But this year, he hadn't shown up. What if this has something to do with the festival? Isabella mused as they sifted through old photos of Thomas's carvings. "It's possible," George agreed. "But that doesn't explain the carving on the wall or why someone would kill him with a pumpkin knife." The days passed with little progress. The town was on edge, rumors of a pumpkin killer spreading like wildfire. The media latched onto the story, fueling the fear with sensational headlines and speculative theories. Then, just as Isabella was starting to feel the pressure, another body was found. This time, the victim was a young woman found in a field near the edge of town. The scene was eerily similar: a deep slash down her torso, a pumpkin carving knife discarded nearby, and the same swirling pattern carved into a tree trunk. The woman was identified as Emily Turner, a local artist known for her intricate wood carvings. Like Thomas, she had participated in the town's pumpkin carving contest, though she had never won. But this year, she had been one of the finalists. Isabella's mind raced as she connected the dots. Both victims were artists, both involved in the festival's carving contest. But why kill them? And why use a pumpkin knife? "We're dealing with someone who's obsessed," she said to George as they stood over Emily's body. "But what's the motive? Is it jealousy, anger, or something else entirely?" George shook his head, equally baffled. "I don't know, but we need to figure it out before anyone else gets hurt." As Isabella and George delved deeper into the investigation, they began to notice a pattern, an unsettling one. Both Thomas and Emily had been part of a small, tight-knit group of artists who regularly participated in the town's fall festival. There were 6 members in total, and all of them had won the pumpkin carving contest at least once over the years. The remaining 4 members were contacted and placed under protective watch, but the killer remained elusive. Despite increased security, another murder occurred, this time targeting a retired school teacher who had won the contest a decade earlier. The pattern was clear. The killer was methodically targeting the members of the group. Then, as Isabella was reviewing the old contest records, something caught her eye. A name that didn't belong. It was a name she hadn't seen before, one that hadn't been mentioned in any of the investigations. Martin Green. Martin had been a participant in the contest several years ago, but had never won. According to the records, he was a local handyman with no particular artistic talent. But further digging revealed a different story. Martin had been obsessed with pumpkin carving, spending hours honing his skills in the hopes of winning the contest. But no matter how hard he tried, he was always overshadowed by the members of the group. Resentment had festered, and after his final loss, Martin had left town in a fit of rage. "Martin Green," Isabella whispered as she stared at his photo. "He's the connection." The pieces finally fell into place. Martin had returned to town, fueled by years of pent-up anger and jealousy. The murders were his twisted form of revenge, each kill an act of defiance against those who had bested him in the contest. But there was one more member of the group left, Rachel Connors, a young teacher who had recently won the contest. Isabella knew they had to act fast. With the town on high alert, Isabella and George staked out Rachel's home, waiting for Martin to make his move. Hours passed, the tension thick in the air, until finally a figure emerged from the shadows, making its way towards the house. "Freeze!" Isabella shouted, stepping into the light, her gun trained on the man. Martin stopped, his face contorted in rage. In his hand was the familiar orange-handled knife, glinting in the moonlight. "It's over, Martin," Isabella said calmly. "Put the knife down." But Martin wasn't listening. His eyes were wild, filled with the fury of years of frustration. With a primal scream, he lunged at Isabella, the knife raised. A single shot rang out, echoing through the quiet night. Martin fell to the ground, the knife clattering beside him. As the dust settled, Isabella felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was over. The pumpkin killer had been stopped. In the days that followed, the full extent of Martin's madness came to light. His home was filled with carvings. Hundreds of pumpkins, each more intricate than the last, all bearing the same swirling pattern that had been found at the crime scenes.